Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Could paranormal parasites take physical form and live among us? What are angels? Are they always good?
Hello and welcome to the 920th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I am Ben, coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live and on YouTube and via TuneIn.com. And those cosmic questions came from my co-host, partner in Paranormal Adventures, and Dad, Paul. And today we bring you a rare appearance by a novelist, some of whose research parallels our own.
Dina Rae is a novelist near Dallas, Texas. She has been quoted as saying that researching the science, history, the unexplained, the theology behind her stories is the most enjoyable part of writing them. Dina has been prominent in the media, social and otherwise. She also reports an interest in UFOs, New World Order, government conspiracies, political intrigue, cults, the Biblical Nephilim, and vampirism.
So, Dina Rae, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, it's great to have you. So I guess we'll hop right into it because we don't like to beat around the bush. So your latest novel wastes no time getting into some graphic details with Andal, your main antagonist. What kind of creature is he, and what does he indicate that you have a very low opinion of angels?
Well, I wrote the novel, and even though it's fiction, it's based on Nephilim stories and Enoch and all of it. And it's one of those things that once you get going, all of a sudden you're into all kinds of texts that stray from the Bible as well. But nonetheless, there obviously was a flood at some point at the beginning of civilization. And apparently angels were either kicked out or commissioned to watch human beings, and that's what inspired me. Armoros is a minor angel. He's not a big one like Azazel. His thing was resolving enchantments, which apparently in witchcraft means you're controlling someone on the battlefield. So that is his theme, so to speak. He controls others. So Azazel is kind of the leader of this group of watchers, and they descended upon Mount Hermon, according to Enoch anyway, and that's kind of what inspired me to get the book going.
Now, let's give a little background here because we're talking about material that's in the book of Genesis and sometimes in Deuteronomy as well. In Genesis, there are references to the Nephilim, or Nephilim, sometimes pronounced, and these are supposed to be the result of mating between angels and humans. And the question is, well, what are angels doing that? So the question, this is where a lot of the ancient alien theorists come in and say these had to be visitors from somewhere or someone else. And the question in my mind, well, if they were aliens, then how did the DNA match up? You have to have almost matching DNA in order to breed like that. So that's a big question. Now, if I remember my Hebrew, Nephil, essentially, it's usually translated as giants, and the Bible refers to these were the heroes who were of old. I mean, whatever that means. But giants, in Hebrew, I would read it more like tyrants, and as Dina said, controlling kind of people. And the I am at the end is simply the plural ending of the word, and so Nephilim would be more than one of them. Maybe too many of them, depending on your experience. So that's just some backgrounds. What do you say about that? Do you think that that's these are labels we put on these beings? Did they really exist? And how does an angel mate with a human?
Well, that's a great question. And according to Enoch, they lusted after human women, and they could somehow shapeshift into men. And in one of the ancient writings in Ethiopia, they mated and got women pregnant, and the babies were, in fact, giants. They split open the women's wound and killed the women once they were born. So, yes, they were giants. A lot of them supposedly had 6 fingers, 6 toes. We learned that later on in the Bible with Goliath. And you're talking about the ancient aliens. Well, they go more with the Sumerian legend with Anunnaki, who were, again, supposedly giants or Nephilim, whichever you prefer to use. So we've got a lot of different writings that suggest there were giants. And if there were giants, it kind of answers the question of how the pyramids were built, how the Tower of Babylon could have been built with no technology back in those days. We have great strength, great heights, and we had a lot of cities that just popped up out of nowhere. These angels also gave. We went through a period of from caveman to beautiful cities all over the Middle East. How did that happen? Where did we get all of this knowledge dumped to us at once? Well, whether you follow ancient alien theory or the Bible, the fallen angel Mount Hermon theory really covers that well, with the angels telling everybody secrets from heaven. And voila, we've got, civilization as we know it today.
Well, excuse me. One of the interesting points, it popped into my mind as I was reading this, was from, of all things, the Muslim Quran, which actually talks about the Virgin Mary more than the Bible does. And when it comes to what the Christians refer to as the Annunciation, with Angel Gabriel or Jabril, as in Arabic, appears to the Virgin Mary, and says what he says. He's going to bear the Son, going to bear Jesus Christ. In the Quran, it says he takes the form of a very attractive man. So here's an angel transforming himself into a man, according to the story anyway, and appearing to Mary, and of course the implication being that she was attracted to him, etc. So that in a way is another arrow in the quiver of your argument, I suppose, if you're looking at that point of view. So as far as there's also the Rephaim as well. They were also giants. They're referred to. They come up in Deuteronomy. So you have the Nephilim and the Rephaim. That translates more or less as the terrible ones, almost like. And they were also those who were in Sheol, almost like ghosts. So I'm sorry, but go ahead.
I think it's important to point out that a lot of other cultures had similar types of stories. Perfect example, Greek mythology, right? So, Gaia, one of the Titans, often associated with the powers of nature, all of her children were giants, and they were imprisoned underneath the earth, under even further than Hades, I believe, is actually the thing. And her whole thing was she got all upset and released the giants onto the earth, which then has the Greek version of fighting giants, also known as gigantomachy. There's also a thing that's pointed out in Deuteronomy where the Hebrews, they go to the Spartans of all people, and they say, hey, we have a common cause here, we have common ancestry, let's go fight giants, basically. And there's all these weird little things that I think people tend to miss in all these ancient documents. And there's also another fun thing where if anybody's thinking, wow, this is weird, why have I never heard this before? Why aren't there any historical figures that are ever pointed out? And one of the groups that's pointed out, I forget if it's in Deuteronomy or not, is the Amalekites, right?
Yeah.
Or it's the Amorites, either or, and essentially they were the Hittites, right? And the most famous of the Hittites being Hammurabi, and Hammurabi was really, really big into this whole thing, and supposedly he had one of these Anunnaki as one of his advisors. And there's all these little things that I think we tend to miss as good old modern materialists, where we look at a situation and we say, all right, it's either complete superstition, it's all hooey, it's all ridiculous, right? You know, they saw a rainstorm or there was a fire, and they were dumb primitives. They didn't have electricity, so they had no idea. So then the next natural step is, oh well, okay, so if they're dum-dums and don't know what electricity is, then therefore aliens did it. I think there's something deeper in there. There's something that's ingrained in all of humanity, where we crave something that's not seen. And there's a portion of reality that we sometimes interact with that we can't tell what it is. And instead of everything being flattened out in a sort of a three-dimensional way, there's that fourth portion of it that we do not interact with, that I think is sort of the key to this mystery.
You talk about Hammurabi, and again, he was accredited with the Coda of Hammurabi, the first attempt at a legal system, so to speak. So what made society think that we need some kind of system to get along? Again, who's giving them these kinds of ideas? Because they're very higher order type of thinking for the time period. And I think it all goes back to these angels, that if you want to call them aliens, you want to call them angels, whichever, they were really whispering in the ears of whoever wanted to listen to advance society.
Well, there's also a really interesting theme in a lot of other mythologies as well, where control over the world, you know, through human means is a really big deal, right? So, like, I pointed this out several times, but it's a really great illustrator of how, let's say, you know, lowercase g gods, angels, whatever you want to call them, how they interact with us. Plato and Socrates are having a dialogue, and Plato says, "Oh, it's so great that Horus gave writing to the Egyptians, you know, because without writing we wouldn't, you know, we could write down all of our ideas, our memories." And Socrates says, "Well, that's great, but then we're not going to remember things." And it's even pointed out in 1 Enoch that, you know, all this technology is given to us, but we're not ready for it yet. So, like, you know, so he calls certain things magic, up to and including music, culture, cosmetics. That's all magic, meant to entice. And it's all these things that we just don't have the wisdom to be able to use. And it's all these things that are given to us, and we try to sort of, you know, control the world around us. It's really fascinating. A bunch of tablets were discovered under Ugarit, and there's some colleges that are even giving out scholarships to learn, you know, Ugaritic, because nobody can read it, so, you know, only a few people can. So they're giving out scholarships so you can learn it, so you can translate these tablets. And 90% of them are like ledgers, accounting, ship's manifests. And it's all very boring stuff, right? You know, but here's the thing. It may seem boring, right? But if you think about it, how much of the stuff that we've written are accounting, ledgers, things that keep track and control over the world around us? The way that we achieve perfection as humans is by exercising our control over the world around us through these tools that have been given to us, right? Whether we're ready for them or not. I'd argue, I don't think we are at all. Perfect example, the nuclear bomb. It's a tool that we have. You know, I'm not going to argue that it was given to us from outside means, but I would say that it's the next logical step of being given weapons, right? Or learning metallurgy, right? Which is one of the things that's considered magic by Enoch. Metallurgy is considered, you know, whatever, right? You know, most old school blacksmiths, let's say, you know, in Rome would pray to Vulcan, and then they would, you know, go and you know, make a sword or something, or, you know, a horseshoe or whatever. But here's a lot of the stuff is double edged, right? It's all ambiguous stuff, but we don't have the ability to really discern whether it's good or bad or not, right?
Well, in a way, that kind of leads us into this discussion of Dina's most recent novel, Peacocks, Pedestals, and Prayers.
It was all part of the plan.
Now, yes, and this is her 8th novel, I believe, right, Dina?
Yes.
And congratulations on it. It came out in
Yes.
August, I believe. Now, I am more of a devotee in fiction of 19th century English novels. Now, when I started reading your book, I didn't expect Jane Austen, okay? But I was rather taken aback by how hard-hitting it is from chapter 1. You've got this Armoros, I guess, the who calls himself Andel, who was obviously centuries old. He's some sort of angel, but he's a vampiristic and cannibalistic angel. So, to tell us what historical background led you to create that character and how you developed it.
Well, thank you. Where I'm getting this whole vampire tie-in with angels starts with Cain from the Bible. The brother Cain and Abel. I'm sure you all heard of him, but maybe your listeners, just a quick refresh. He's the one that killed his brother because they gave God some offerings. He gave God, I think, his harvest, and Abel gave God an animal. And God made a big deal about Abel's offering, and insulted Cain's offering. And so that supposedly sparked jealousy, and that's the reason why Cain killed his brother. In the Muslim Quran, there was more going on between these two brothers. They wanted to marry the same girl. Her name, I think, was Aklama. And it appeared that God wanted Abel to marry this girl. She was very beautiful, rich, the whole thing. And Cain was upset about that as well. Again, there's two different sources. But anyway, after he killed his brother, he was banished. But this is where the vampire tie-in happens. He leaves. He winds up in the land of Nod, but before all that, he wanders for many years, and he somehow meets up with Lilith. Now, Lilith is not in the regular Bible, but she appears in ancient sacred Jewish texts, and she supposedly was Adam's first wife. And if you read the Bible, there's an inference that Eve was Adam's first wife.
That's right.
And his only wife. And apparently not. Two other sources. So he meets up with this Lilith, who in witchcraft, she's a big thing. There's a Lilith fair. She has some kind of symbolism going on with women's rights. In today's world, she has something to do with lesbianism. I'm not sure how that ties in, but that's where we're at right now. And they have an affair, and they open each other up, so they're bleeding, and they drink each other's blood, hence vampirism. And somewhere before when Cain gets kicked out of Eden and he is roaming, God puts the mark of Cain on him, and he can never die. So that's, again, another vampire tie-in. And supposedly Bram Stoker did a lot of this research, and this is kind of leading up to his Dracula character. But then he was visited by 3 angels, and they gave him 3 chances to repent. And all 3 of those chances, he said no. So some things, they kind of made it worse for him. Like, he had an aversion to sunlight, hence the vampire, tie-in. And, he, couldn't die. But he does die many hundreds of years later, but he couldn't die. An aversion to sunlight. And he had these, a couple other vampire things were, cursed onto him. So he does have a son named Enoch, which is not the Enoch from the Watchers. However, Cain's line of descendants have very, very, very similar names to Seth, who is Adam's next son, to Seth's descendants. So some people, there are theories going around that Enoch, the one that talked to the Watcher angels, is the same as Cain's son Enoch. Even though the times don't match, the names are just, there's too much similarities with the names of descendants. So I'm kind of rambling, sorry. That's how the whole vampire thing ties in, starting with Cain and drinking blood. So
no, that makes sense. Yeah, just a little bit of background for the audience. Anything like the Book of Enoch, and of course we always get jokes. Oh, E-N-O and E-N-O-C-H, it must be related. So at this point in the time, everybody on the planet would have been descended from the guy. But the point being that the books of known as the Apocrypha are books that were not included in the official Bible.
In Ethiopia, it is.
Oh,
yes.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. In Ethiopia, the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch, well, one Enoch is included in the canon.
But Enoch, well, thank you, Ben. I didn't know that. I'm the one who spent 10 years in the seminary. Anyway, the Book of Enoch is very interesting, and I'm sure that Dina can expand on this. You have Enoch, who was a sort of go-between, sort of between the native population, which would have been presumably our remote ancestors, who were pretty much very primitive at the time, and the Most High, who, depending on whether you're reading Genesis or the Karsag epics or other contemporary documents, lived either on an island in the sky or in a very high mountain. And these Anunnaki, I guess you'd call them angels today, took him aboard a craft and whisked him off on jaunts to see the Most High, and he would look down from the craft and describe in detail the bad, I guess the bad ones who had mated with women, who were condemned to the what sounds to me like the Rift Valley that runs from the Middle East all the way down to Kenya, and all this sort of thing. And then, but when they put the Bible together, the Council of Nicaea in 325 A.D., at least the Christian Bible, they thought this was too weird to put in. They almost didn't put in the Book of Revelation at the end of the New Testament because it was too strange, but they did. But anyway, that's just a little background. So, Dina, how would the Book of Enoch? What's your take on that, and what the physicality of the angels who are reported in these books? I mean, that angels are supposed to be spirits, but these Nephilim and all are all very physical. What say you?
Well, again, I know a lot of people kind of think this is mumbo jumbo. Like, how can a spirit take on a being? Well, we know today that we can edit genes. So if you can edit your gene in a way to become a spirit, why couldn't you edit your gene in a way to become a physical being? So they all chose to be men, at least in Enoch. There's other writings that include women in this group, but for the most part, most people agree that they shape-shifted into men, or I'm going to say genetically altered themselves into men. And this is where it gets very confusing, at least for me in my research, because this group that called the Watchers, or Grigori, were supposedly commissioned to watch over humanity. However, there's a lot of back and forth with how there's supposedly 200 of them. There's a lot of back and forth with some of these people were not commissioned. They were fallen angels or kicked out. So I'm not really sure. It sounds like a mixture of the two. And they saw human women, and they supposedly fell in love and lusted them and took them to Mount Hermon, where these sexual encounters took place. And that's where Enoch met them. And he took them to the different levels of heaven. And Enoch never died. They said that he was alive and never died, and he walked straight to heaven, and he was a righteous guy. But again, back to Cain's offspring, he had a son named Enoch, and they called him Enoch the Evil, and he encountered with Watchers too. So there's so many similarities between the different versions of stories. You start to wonder, is Enoch one and the same? And I know you were talking earlier about Greek mythology. A lot of people think that Enoch was Hermes. So, and Thoth. So he got around the different cultures in the Middle East back in the day, for sure. Anyway, he's the great-grandfather of Noah, and that's kind of where the whole thing started, where these Watchers were reproducing giant after giant after giant after giant, and supposedly that ticked God off to the point where he brought the great flood. Now, it says in Genesis that it says something like Noah and his family were the only ones left who were pure of heart or just pure. So in church, and by the way, I go to church pretty much every Sunday. I mean, I'm not perfect about it, but I'm an avid churchgoer, Bible group. Never has the pastor ever talked about Nephilim, and I don't know why. They're in the Bible quite a few times. So, anywho, in Genesis, it says that Noah was pure. Okay, well, that's interpreted as pure of heart, but I think it means genetically pure, because based on other writings as well as the Bible, the entire globe of civilization was just infected with all of these Nephilim, and God did not want that for us, so he wiped them out. But this is where it gets really interesting. Okay, so there was the flood. Okay, then how after the flood, we've got all of these new stories about Nephilim. So they weren't destroyed. What happened? Where did they go? Where did they hide? Did the fallen angels come back to earth and repopulate the Nephilim? There's a lot of unanswered stories with their demise, and then they come back, and then they disappear again in the times of Saul and David. So I think there's enough writing to suggest that, yeah, they were here for sure. But then on the other side of the coin, what happened to them? And a lot of people have all kinds of theories about that a lot of people think remnants of them are part of secret societies. There's, of course, the Basque population with the RH negative and O blood in France/Spain. There's it's really fascinating, and it was one of those things for me that once I started with maybe just Genesis, it took me down a rabbit hole of endless information that seemed to contradict each other, but then it also matched up at the same time.
Okay, well, at that point, let's take our mid-show break. And you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM, 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley with our fascinating guest, Dina Rae. We'll be right back.
The night is alive. Join us and take a walk on the weird side when you tune in to The Kingdom of Nye, hosted by Heather Wade, the finest in late night talk. Listen live free weeknights starting at 9 p.m. Pacific time at thekingdomofnye.com, talkstreamlive.com, and the Paranormal Radio app. Wanna take a ride?
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
Okay, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and FM. And our guest today, Dina Rae, a rare appearance by a novelist, but she is fact-based, that's why she's here. And we have a question from Peter in Bogota, Colombia.
Okie dokie. And Peter writes to us, Can you explain your creative process of writing novels? Do you start the process by inventing characters first, or do you prefer to work especially in the beginning?
Oh, well, thanks for the question. I tend to write novels based on theories and biblical lore. I'm a huge, really into New World Order and Freemasonry, other secret societies. And I kind of take what I've learned and I fictionalize it to make it into a story. So it's not when I'm writing a story, it's not really about the characters or the fiction about it. It's about the information and the research, and I try to make it interesting so that the average reader wouldn't feel that they're getting a history dump. They're reading a story and it's fun, but they're learning at the same time how all of these things came to be. So that for me, it's really the research that has me forming a story of how it could play out, of how it could be in modern day, of how it was at the beginning of time. For me, it's the research sparks the story ideas, and then the characters kind of come afterwards. And I'm a high school teacher, and I'm an English teacher too. So I do love reading. That's one of my biggest passions.
Okay, we have an additional question from Peter that just came in.
And he writes, it's a good question, and it's a fun one too. For Dina, where is the fossil record for all these giants if they were real?
Yeah, he asked the easy question. Now is the hard one.
Well, I mean, certain conspiracy shows have them, so I don't know. Again, that's one of those, Ripley's Believe It or Not type of a question. That's a great question. I wish I could answer that. But we've got too many ancient writings to suggest that everybody was making this up.
Well, we can help you on that one. Maybe in Fall River, Massachusetts, right, sort of in the edge of our listening area here, there was supposedly a giant skeleton found, but there are some issues about whether it was legitimate or not. But
well, there's also very recently discovered there was a ziggurat found. It was dug up by archaeologists, and inside there was a bronze bed, and it was 15 feet long, 10 feet high, huge, completely huge. And the significance of this bed, because you're like, okay, cool, well, what's the point, right? In Deuteronomy, there is King Og, king of Bashan. Really, really, really a big deal. Like the first sentence of Deuteronomy says, the defeat of Og, king of Bashan. And it's even in, for all of our Orthodox listeners out there, there's a piece of hymnography that I think is usually sung around Good Friday, which says, Og has been defeated, something to that effect. And it's a big deal because tradition tells us that Og was a giant. And, at that point, it was like, it seemed like some sort of piety thing, like, okay, cool, yeah, whatever, it's some sort of bit of myth, who cares? But the discovery of Og's bed, in this location, the exact same size as was described, 15, it was, 10 cubits by 5 cubits, which was roughly the length of your forearm to your middle finger. Sometimes there was the king's cubit. It shows that, okay, so this bed was real. So what's the point, right? There's all sorts of people that will say, okay, well, we did a show on the Adena culture a while ago here in the United States and North America and South America, of these sort of this giant tribe of indigenous people who were sort of like, they were the big shots, big deal. You talk to some natives, they'll tell you about graves of giants, right? Even I heard recently there's a bunch of legends in Romania where giants are buried. They'll talk about vampires, werewolves, these little villages middle of nowhere, and they'll just, talk about like, oh yeah, right over there you can find graves of giants. All this stuff. These things exist in our cultures for whatever reason, right? Who knows if giants were really a thing or if it was just sort of a symbol for something, because it wasn't necessarily like, okay, well, they were really big, maybe. Depending on your translation of whatever document you're reading, but that they were a type of person, right? Someone who was not quite human, right?
To just piggyback on what you just talked about, that's interesting that you're talking about Og, because he was supposedly a Nephilim, and he was the first that we know about to survive the flood. And it's also been written about him that he survived by hanging onto a ladder from Noah's Ark. That's how he survived, and supposedly
I never knew that.
His angelic father was none other than the most famous of the Watchers, the leader, Azazel. So
Interesting. I never knew that.
Well, on that note, we'll get back into the book here. Now, regardless of his physical stature, Amaros is the this kind of struck my funny bone, is the head of an advertising agency. Which leads me to the question: do you see whatever these beings are or were, still active in some way, either physically or spiritually or both, in the modern world?
That's a great question. They seem to have had in the past united to have a common goal, and that is to wipe the Israelites off of the face of the planet. And starting with David and Goliath. David could have been a target for all we know, because he picked up 5 stones in that story, and all he needed was 1. So there were other Nephilim back in those days that he was expecting to see. It seems like their whole entire goal has been to stop the messianic line for Jesus. So are they still around? Well, Jesus came. So, yeah, they're definitely still around. But what makes me, of all of this research, what to me is the most confusing is this whole war in heaven in Revelation, which, first of all, we all kind of think that the war in heaven happened before Adam. But when we read Job, we've got Satan back and forth from heaven to earth with Job. So it couldn't have happened before humans. So in Revelation, it says that Lucifer, Satan, wanted to be God, and he and a third of all stars, or a third of angels, tried to overthrow God and were sent to this earth. Well, I guess my question is, did that happen back in the day, before humankind, even though it appears that it didn't? Or is that about to happen, or did it recently happen? When were these angels, these fallen angels, put down here? And I guess that's where the modern day tie-in is. Do we have demons walking the earth now? Maybe they're not giants. They would obviously stand out way too much. But are they just regular looking people? And I guess I'm starting to ramble. I apologize, but
No.
that was one of my biggest questions that I had when writing this book. So you're an expert in the Bible. That's my question to you.
Well, I'm not an expert. I studied a lot, for many years. However, there are different points of view in the Bible. The translations in English are all terrible. However, one does wonder about the wars of the gods, as it's in all cultures everywhere, and even the ancient. When I was in Australia talking to the Aborigines, they had a tradition of that kind of thing, the wars of the gods. So something happened that affected the human psyche. We may put our own labels on it, but I think your point, Dina, about this happening, after the creation of man rather than before, is a very good point. Why would it be so present in all of our cultures in one form or another, whether it be the Bible or the Indian legends, from India, the correct. I'm seeing your moment here. Mahabharata.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out what you were saying. For some reason,
yeah.
I had Hammurabi stuck in my head.
Yeah, your Sanskrit is rusty. So these are all questions. Another point would be that I myself have had physical conflict on 2 occasions with what we thought were we called demons at the time. Which I think is pretty much our term. I think their theology, such as it is, might be, I think they will make it parallel our own if they can get food from it, and push buttons and get us all upset, that sort of thing. And this is, again, one we referred to many times on the show, 1974, the Bridgeport, Connecticut poltergeist case. I was a seminary student working with a priest and Ed and Lorraine Warren at the time, and I was the only one in the house with the family, and these things, 4 of them arrived. You could see these gauzy structures. I refer to it as gauzy kind of things. But when I pushed against one, it had a physical body that we really couldn't entirely see. So the notion of these things being able to take physical form, or coming from a world where they do have physical form, into ours is very real to me. These are things I'll never forget. So that really struck me in your book too, Dina. Was I've seen this. Yeah, I've felt this in a way. Now this thing didn't have an advertising agency, but it was there, making a mess out of this house and this kind of thing, and it really confused me because these things were supposed to be non-corporeal entities or spirits. I know that's just a comment. So in your novel, in the last one, it seems as though the wars of the gods, as it were, is still going on.
Exactly. That's really a huge inspiration to me, because I seriously, with the Revelation story, all of it are these demons / fallen angels right here, right now, pretending to be human beings, whipping us into a frenzy one way or another. Is the tribulation about to begin? Is Lucifer, again, to go back to this timeline thing, which I'm really kind of stuck with, in Genesis, okay, they got kicked out of Eden because Satan tempted them with the apple or pomegranate or whatever fruit you want to say it was. And if Lucifer wasn't kicked out of heaven at that point, because we find out later he was still going there in Job, then who was the snake that got them kicked out of Eden? And again, in Revelation is the end of the book. It's the end of the story. It's the climax of the entire book, so to speak. It's the resolution of the book. Why is that story at the end of the book? Again, did it not happen? It was written in past tense. Did it not happen and it's going to happen in the future? I guess that's where I kind of go in a circle, round and round. Is that what is happening now? Are we being invaded by demons? And, not to get too off the topic, but this whole, I don't know if you guys heard about that one rapper, Travis Scott, I believe his name was.
Ask me about Bach. I can tell you.
I'm familiar with it if it makes you feel any better.
I don't know. I don't listen to rap, but I am a high school teacher, so I know something about him. I certainly don't know one song that he sings. But he supposedly was into devil worshiping. And is this what we're seeing right now? Are we, another rapper, Lil Nas, okay, or Little Nas, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, N-A-S. He's another one. He has a video out where he's lap dancing with Satan, and he has a Nike contracted with him, and he has Satan shoes from Nike. So is this what we're getting right now? Do we have fallen angels / demons walking the earth right now? Have a third of them landed? I guess is my biggest question of them all.
Well, there's two really important things I want to point out. One, there's nowhere in the Bible anywhere that says that Satan and the devil are the same thing. Nowhere. Which leads to the question of, who is the snake? Church tradition has taught that the snake is death itself. That Sheol, being both a thing and not a thing, right, is being a place and a thing, right, is death, right? So we're not, the ancient Israelites weren't stupid. They knew snakes didn't eat dirt, right? But dirt symbolized what we would turn into, ash, that it would consume us, right? So he was death itself. And so Satan being or Satan now, depending on how you read it, being the poison of God, the almost like the lawyer of God almost, functions separately. So there's nowhere that it says anything. This is where I always have a difficulty understanding Western ideas of it, because it's like it never really has come up as like, there's this whole hierarchy, they're all coming for us and whatever. It's just kind of like, the way that the falls, the five-ish falls of angels, because there's technically five of them, scattered throughout Scripture. The really important thing to keep in mind is how ancient people viewed things. They viewed it very differently than we do. How time functioned was very different. How reality was experienced wasn't separate layers. It was all kind of happening at the same time. We as good old modern people like to break out things and say, there's political events here. There's, some sort of religious thing that's kind of like tacked on the end. And, it's all really just a class struggle. And that's thanks to our good old 19th century German historians who came up with that idea that all history is the story of class struggle, and that kind of stuck. Whether it's true or not, the problem is that we look at history and we try to view it as a science, and that's just not how it is, right? We try to find the essence of it in a scientific way, which you just can't do. I mean, even Aristotle will tell you that you can't know the essence of events. But what we do know is a subjective experience of it recorded in various different writings from different cultures, and we view it as 21st century Americans, which is just like, it's just we're at a tremendous disadvantage. So to think in a different way while reading it is really, really, really hard to do. But something very important to point out is that it doesn't say anywhere, when this stuff happened, because it's not really important. There's a saying from there was a 60 Minutes episode that was done, and it was right after the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and they went to this I think it might have been St. Mary's Monastery in like Egypt. They go to Egypt and they find these monks, and they had copies of the Dead Sea Scrolls because they keep copies of everything, right? Whether it's useful or not, they just kept copies of it because you have to keep the history alive. And so they had copies of all of this, and they had a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the reporter was just like, "Well, didn't this ruin your faith? Like, why you've had this for centuries? Like, why haven't you done anything about it?" And the monk just simply said, "Well, it's not profitable to read, so we just don't." that was the response, and the reporter was dumbfounded because it's true, right? What matters is, if there are demons wandering around, cool, great. What matters is, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing our best to be good people, right? There's going to be lowercase g gods everywhere, right? We're building them ourselves with artificial intelligence. It's like the golden calf all over again, because humans make the same mistakes all the time, right? That's just the one thing that hasn't changed in thousands of years is human nature has stayed exactly the same. And the best we can do is just be good people.
Well, what more can be said, except we can ask Dina to talk about her books, where people can find out more. And she has a website or Facebook or whatever.
Well, again, thank you so much for having me on. My website is conspiracycrackpot.com.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My blog, I have two blogs, Dina Rae's Right Stuff with a W, .blogspot.com. I have another blog, conspiracycrackpot.home. I also am on Facebook. I have a Facebook fan page. By all means, please give me a like. Totally appreciate it. That's Dina Rae Books, and that's RAE. And then I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Peacock Pedestal. That's on Twitter. I'm also on Pinterest. I'm on Instagram. I try to, join as many as I can. I can't keep up with it because there's always, a different site popping up. But I do try to have a strong media presence, and I'm pretty easy to find. On a side note, there is another Dina Rae out there. She is a backup singer for Eminem. That's obviously not me, but I have another Dina Rae's out there. I'm not a singer, so.
Well, thank you for pointing that out.
I was wondering why the name sounded familiar, too.
So the book is Peacocks, Pedestals and Prayers, Dina Rae. And what's your next book?
Hopefully a sequel. I definitely would like to do a sequel and continue on with the Easterhouse family and, again, more fallen angels. Another thing that kind of goes with all of this is the Enochian angel script of, the 16th century with Queen Elizabeth and John Dee and Edward Kelly and that kind of
cool
thing. And that is definitely in my plans.
A lot of amazing material. Well, Dina Rae, thank you for being with us today, and we'll be in touch off the air.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So let's get to our announcements.
Yes, we have plenty, as always. So I guess we'll start off with this Friday, November 19th, as part of the gallery lecture series at the Pine Bush UFO and Paranormal Museum in Crawford, New York. My dad, or both of us, but more,
actually, it's just going to be me.
It's going to be you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not myself. Work is picking up, and it is very unforgiving at this point. But my dad will present an in-person program on Behind the Paranormal. Everything You Know Is Wrong, and that's at 8 p.m., and we'll have more details next week. And we'll be at the New England Parafest in Kittery, Maine, which runs from April 10th to the 26th. That's 2022. Not sure just when we'll be on the schedule, but we do plan to do a live broadcast from there, and it's going to be a great event. You got 2 years' worth of material saved up at this point, so...
Yes, it's been 2 years since we had that event, and we're looking forward to 2022 when hopefully all the great events, Exeter UFO Festival, the Greater New England UFO Conference, etc., will be back, and hopefully there won't be anything to derail those this time.
Yes, and everything kind of gets back to normal.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, after years of technical problems, all the regular recorded radio broadcasts of Behind the Paranormal from CBS, Achieve Radio, and here on WOON AM and FM have been restored in the archives at BehindTheParanormal.com. There are a few straggler specials and unbroadcast interviews that we have yet to restore, but almost all of it's there. That includes the Return to Rendlesham series from 2010, 2011 on CBS Radio, and all related shows, along with the Achieve Radio monthly 2-hour specials from 2009. Still working on restoring a few others, as I say. Also hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Their collection is incomplete, but BehindTheParanormal.com has the fully stocked shelves there as far as these past shows are concerned.
Indeed.
And in addition, our show now has its own app. It's bare bones, but it's free. I mean, what do you want for nothing? Right now, it just has our most recent past shows, but we plan to add features as we go. Just go to BehindTheParanormal.com, and you can download the link for the app. And it's not in the stores, online app stores just yet, but it will be hopefully soon.
You can check out our books along with those of our guest co-hosts at our show website, BehindTheParanormal.com, where you also can find out more about the show, our many cases over the years, our public appearances, and how to book us, along with some of our 900-plus free recorded shows, now restored, as my dad mentioned.
Now, our website, behindtheparanormal.com, also has a charity page. We ask that you check that out. It has links to several good causes we've adopted on the show. And now we've added the most recently is the Hope for Hilldale Cemetery in Haverhill, Massachusetts, historical restoration going on with our good friend Tom Spitaleri, who's head of the board there. Other charities include USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans. That's one that's very dear to my heart personally, because I've been there. Youth Mentoring Connection in Los Angeles. Tony LaRae doing great work out there. The Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero. Now, we know all the people who run these things, and you can trust them. And also the Milk Fund here in northern Rhode Island. Anybody in our listening area knows about that.
Yes.
So what do we got for next week, Ben?
Well, next week we have a very special show that we got going on November 21st. Ray Hernandez of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute returns to the show to give us the latest on some distinguished scientists who are studying paranormal contact, some of whom have become experiencers themselves.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Ray is always fascinating.
Yeah, we haven't had him on in a while.
It's been a while. He makes his appearances, his entrance here and there, but the CCRI, which around here means Community College of Rhode Island.
Yeah, it took me a while to get used to that acronym.
Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. Anyway, we'll leave you today with a pithy thought from Helen Keller, who, of course, was blind and had her other senses very much heightened. Quote, people often have no idea how fair the flower is to the touch, nor do they appreciate its fragrance, which is the soul of the flower. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno. And thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.